On December 17, 1903, the Wright Brothers changed the world by creating and successfully flying the first self-powered, controlled, heavier-than-air machine, essentially an airplane. By the 19th century, electricity, steel, and petroleum were all usable products. The propeller was invented in 1835, and in 1877, the first practical four-stroke internal combustion engine was made. And by 1903, the radio. The Wright brothers weren't the first in the air. A hot air balloon had been around since 1783. Also, there was a rigid-formed airship that became known to us as the Zeppelin. By 1903, many began experimenting with flight, though with many failures. The Wright brothers owned a bicycle shop in Dalton, Ohio, and in 1899 began to study aeronautics and build kites. They discovered that no one had found a way to control their aircraft well in the air. By observing birds, they came up with the concept of wing warping, which raises and lowers flaps on the wings. In 1900, they built their first glider and chose Kitty Hawk, North Carolina to test it, but it didn't work to their liking. So they built another one in 1901, but it still had the same problem. They built their own wind tunnel and conducted experiments. In 1902, they built a controllable glider. Now they needed to build one with controllable and motorized power. They built their own four-cylinder gasoline engine that weighed less than 200 pounds, which was placed in their newly built 21-foot-long flyer, which finished weight was 600 pounds. They flew it first on December 14th, but it crashed and they needed to do repairs on it.
Then, on December 17, 1903, they and 5 helpers set up the 60-foot monorail track, and their flyer started off. Around 40 feet along the track, the flyer took off, staying in the air for 12 seconds and going 120 feet. The Wright brothers had successfully made the first heavier-than-air controlled flight. They had 3 more flights that day, their longest 59 seconds, that went 852 feet, after which a gust of wind crashed it. Over the next several years, they continued perfecting their airplane designs, and in 1906 earned a United States patent. They also showcased their airplane in Europe and applied for French and German patents. And beginning in 1908, they began testing their airplane at Fort Myers for the United States Army. That same year, they experienced the first fatal plane crash. They continued perfecting their airplane to make it more safe, and in 1909, flew an airplane that met the United States Army requirements. At that same time, the Curtis Company infringed on their patent rights, and they began a series of lawsuits which was last year. Then in 1912, Wilbur died.
The problem they and everyone else had faced was how to generate enough power to get the machine off the ground and to keep it going once it was up in a stable and steady flight. The Wrights had developed a lightweight 25-horsepower engine which provided a much higher power-to-weight ratio than anything that had gone before.
But in 1942, the Smithsonian retracted their statement, ending the controversy. And then in 1948,
with this and a little help on the launch site from a heavy lead weight, they were airborne and away.
At the time, few had recognized how the Wright brothers' heavier-than-air controlled flight would change the world. Many believed it wouldn't even affect it that greatly. But their achievements led to the entire aerospace industry today. It is a product of their innovation to allow a pilot to navigate an aircraft in all 3 dimensions, which is also used in spacecraft, submarines, and even robots.